Many people found the AutoISO quite confusing when I made this video, and I wanted to explain a few things because there were some claims about how wrong I am using AutoISO, and got a lot of emails and comments about that. And I was a bit surprised that it was so confusing. That's why I will have this video on as a part 2 video for that way of shooting that I use AutoISO quite a bit. Hi, it's Peter here, and let's get right into the business. I was supposed to go out and shoot this video, but the weather isn't really nice, so I'm doing it in my newly renovated office room, which is something that I really enjoy. I have this setup if I want to show some product. This is a great place to do that. This looks horrible. I need to fix the setup in order to use this. There are still some things that I need to figure out, and there was a walk-in closet that had a small door, and wall was knocked down, so I have more space for my workstation and the desk and all that. But I will maybe make a video of the way I've set up my small office, and please let me know in the comments down below if you want to see a studio tour like many YouTubers do. But now, enough of that, and let's get into the topic. One claim was that ISO is not part of the exposure triangle, and then some of you found exposure pi to be really confusing, and some even corrected me that it's not a pi, it's a triangle. Let me explain a bit more what I mean by exposure pi and why I think it is a lot better way of showing the relationship between shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And then the third one was that AutoISO does not give me the lowest possible ISO. But let's start with the first claim. ISO is not part of the exposure. And yes, in technical terms, that is true. The reason is that raising ISO does not increase the amount of light of the photo sites on the sensor can capture. And yes, it is very practical to say that it is, though, in my opinion. Here is an example. If we have the value of 1/25th of a second f5.6 and ISO 160, and in a situation, it will give me the best possible exposure. Let's think like that. I realize that the shutter speed is too long to freeze the motion. I need a faster shutter speed. Let's say 1/500th of a second is the one that will freeze the motion. That is to stop faster. I could open the aperture and set it to f2.8. But what if 2.8 is too shallow depth of field? I need the f5.6. So what I need to do is to raise the ISO. So this is why I think it is much more practical to say that it is part of the exposure pi, which I'm getting into next. And some claim that it's confusing if you say that it's part of the ISO. Well, I mean, the ISO is part of the exposure pi. I think it makes a lot more sense in that, or when I'm saying it that way. I think it's no-brainer, and I've been teaching this and photography so many years, and I think that this is a lot better way to saying. And if you start arguing that it's not, then it goes too technical and people get really confused. And then let's talk about exposure pi and why some people find it confusing. Well, some people claim that every time for different lighting conditions you need to have a different size of pi. And yeah, that's true. But if we draw one circle and divide that into 3, and that size represents the amount of light at that particular time. So if we have the same example of 1/125th of a second f5.6 and ISO 160. If we need to have a faster shutter speed, the shutter speed slide gets smaller. And there's a gap now, meaning that something else needs to be bigger. And we could open up the aperture, which makes it bigger, or we could rise up the ISO, which would make it bigger. So the relationship, if you change one of the 3, shutter speed, aperture, or ISO, you need to compensate changing the other with the same proportion. Of course, we are assuming that light or the exposure is spot on, the one that you want. And I think the exposure pi and the sizes of the slices tells a little bit more than just the triangle. That's my opinion, and I think this is something that I've been used. I'm not sure if it was Anthony Morganti from Mr. Photographer website, YouTube channel, that I saw this at the first time. If I'm not correct, I'm sorry about that if I said this wrong, but I think it was him that first time, or where I saw this first time, and I think it was clever. And then the third claim, that AutoISO won't give you the lowest ISO, or the lowest possible. And sometimes the lowest possible can be 3200 if it's really dark. We have to remember that lowest possible does not always mean that it's the base ISO of the camera. But if you set the minimum shutter speed to something, then you will always have the lowest possible ISO, and it will start rising the ISO when a longer shutter speed is needed. And that's the key. If you just have it on auto and you don't adjust the minimum shutter speeds, then yes, it might give you a higher ISO than actually needed. And that is the crucial thing. Set the shutter speed minimum to something. If I have it on 1 second, everything will be shot with lowest ISO possible if the shutter speed is shorter than 1 second. When it needs to be 2 seconds, then it will remain on 1 second, but it will raise up the ISO. That's the logic on that. So that claim is also something that you need to trust on me. I've never really said that before, but yeah, trust me on this one. That's the way it is. And then there was actually an extra claim which I did not address enough, and that one was something that you people were really right, that rising the ISO will make the dynamic range lower. So you will have less dynamic range if you raise up the ISO. That's a fact. But is that a real problem if you use AutoISO? Because it will always choose the lowest possible ISO if you have set up your camera, like I told you in the previous claim. And here is the original video if you haven't seen it and you hear first, but go and check out that and see what I mean, and come back to this video and watch it again and listen to me explaining what I mean. I'm sorry that I was a bit maybe confusing on that first video, but I hope this clears things up. But hey, thanks for watching, and bye for now.